Okay, the time is 6:30. I'll call the Newcastle Planning Board meeting to order. The date is September 21st, 2023. Second item on the agenda is the review of the minutes from the August 17th, 2023 Planning Board meeting. Do we have a motion on the minutes as presented?
Yeah, I'll move. We approve the minutes.
Moved and did you say second?
I wasn't here.
You weren't here. That's right. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I
I'll
apologize. Thank you very much. Moved and seconded. Any discussion, comments, corrections on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor, passing the minutes? 3 and 1 abstain. All right, so item number 3, old business. A, public hearing, historic special district review ordinance. So we're going to invite Isabel Exley up to give us a little brief overview of what has been going on regarding the historic special district review ordinance and the committee. And then we'll open the public hearing portion of the meeting after that. Oh,
I do have a presentation. Sorry.
no, that's great. You got the Wi-Fi working. That's awesome.
Yes. Okay, so like Ben said, I know that I've met a lot of you before through the meeting process so far, but my name is Isabel Exley. I am a hired consultant hired by the town to complete the historic preservation ordinance process, and I've been working with the ad hoc committee since February, going through that process.
Can I just real quick, Jeff, are you picking the mic up? But there's not speakers here to amplify, right? Okay, so you'll only be able to hear Isabel's voice. There's no amplification in here.
Oh, okay, so I'll just project.
Yeah, if you can.
And let me know if you can't hear. Yeah. Yes.
Just turn the table. It's fine. It's on wheel.
So in general, what we'll cover briefly is what is historic preservation? How did we get here? A general broad overview of the ordinance, and then next steps. And then we'll move into the public hearing process from you all. So just broadly, historic preservation is a conversation about the past for the purposes of planning for the future. For the purposes of this ordinance, that means identifying and regulating buildings, structures, sites, or districts with cultural, social, architectural, or historic value in order to communicate with future generations those places, including individual buildings and whole neighborhoods, which have been important or significant to the broader story of Newcastle as well as its inhabitants. I alluded to this at the beginning, but in terms of how we got here, so it's my understanding that throughout the development of the core zoning code, historic preservation was discussed, but consensus was not reached at the time on how to tackle it. So it was ultimately decided that the SD historic zoning district boundaries, which are the existing boundaries, captured what the community considered to be historic neighborhoods, and then interim demolition delay standards were added, which are outlined in Article 7, Section 22 of the core zoning code. That's your existing code. There was also general agreement that a future committee would be appointed to hold public meetings and discuss this topic in greater detail. And then after that, the pandemic happened, and this initiative was ultimately put off until earlier this year, when at the recommendation of the planning board, the select board appointed the 5-member ad hoc historic preservation committee, which was intended to hold public meetings, actually draft an ordinance, and then return to both the planning board and the select board with an ordinance that could be adopted. A request for volunteers was posted at the town office and was in the newspaper. And then in February, the select board appointed the ad hoc committee. Based on the planning board's recommendation from January, the ad hoc committee group is comprised of one member of the planning board, one member of the select board, and then one member from each of the town's 3 historic districts. Since then, the group has held 10 meetings plus a public informational workshop that I know many of you attended in July. And all of these were well attended by impacted members of the public. The group has also worked through 11 drafts of an ordinance, which was renamed from a historic preservation ordinance to a historic special district review ordinance to more adequately capture what it is that they're actually intending to regulate, which is the existing districts. And then in August, the ad hoc committee unanimously voted to pass along to the planning board the draft ordinance for further review and a public hearing thereon, which brings us here. So just for your knowledge, the proposed ordinance will impact all properties within the this purple color on the screen. So it's roughly the Sheepscot Village, Damascotta Mills, and the Glidden Street and surrounding streets neighborhoods. Thank you. In general, the ordinance would establish a historic preservation review board, which would be tasked with reviewing certain designated projects. It also establishes 3 tiers of review. So tier 1 would be staff level administrative review by the town planner. Tier 2 is review and public hearing at a meeting of the Historic Preservation Review Board. And tier 3 is a larger, more complex project than tier 2. Typically things like brand new construction of a whole house or a large addition, which might also require technical assistance by a hired historic preservation consultant, and again would require a review and public hearing at a meeting of the board. On the screen is tier 1 staff review projects. So these would be all of the projects falling under administrative review without further public hearing. They include things like the removal of certain architectural features, the replacement of materials and features not in compliance with the ordinance with materials and features that would be, the installation of missing historical features supported by photographic evidence or other kind of physical evidence, repointing and other masonry repairs, construction or replacement of patios or decks where the majority wouldn't be seen from the public realm. The addition, removal, or replacement of cloth, canvas, or acrylic awnings that otherwise comply with review standards, as well as meters, vents, telephone boxes that aren't on the front of the building. The removal of deteriorated accessory buildings like sheds or garages, which aren't original to the site. The installation of a temporary structure designed to promote safe access for individuals with disabilities, so long as the temporary structure can be removed and wouldn't impact the essential form of the property. So like a temporary access ramp. The installation of fences or low walls of wood, stone, or brick in certain areas on the property. The replacement of exterior light fixtures and the installation of new light fixtures. Then tier 2 projects are those, again, which would require review and public hearing with the review board. Those are replacement architectural details when there will be a change. The installation of fences or low walls of wood in the front of the property between the street and the building. The installation or modification of renewable energy systems like solar panels or windmills. And then any changes to roof lines, including rooftop additions, decks, or dormers. And then finally, like I mentioned, tier 3 projects would be new construction or additions, demolition of a part of a structure. And then if there's a discovery of any archaeological resource, that would also kick the project up to tier 3, as well as, again, new additional structures. So new barns, new garages, and the moving of buildings. I do want to note that all projects, regardless of who reviews them, would be subject to the standards as outlined in the ordinance. And there are standards around alterations and additions, demolitions and relocations, new construction and additions, and then a set of special standards for solar panels, windmills, renewable energy systems. In general, I want to note that all standards were based off of the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties, rehabilitation, which is the act or process of making possible a compatible use through repair, alterations, and additions, while still preserving those portions or features which convey its historical, cultural, or architectural values of the building. So it's based on a set of federal standards available. In terms of the review process, just very briefly, when a property owner is considering a project, the first step would generally be to contact the town planner. Many projects would be exempt from review, although some might still require review by the CEO under your existing core zoning code, or the town planner can explain to you what tier of review your project would be subject to. And then the applicant would go ahead and assemble the application materials demonstrating compliance with the relevant review standards of Article 2. That would include things like photos of the existing building and what you're proposing to change it with, or add or remove from the building. And then if the project is determined to be a tier 1, based on the tier 1 standards that I went over at the beginning, the long list, the town planner would approve the application. Under the core zoning code, there may still be additional review required by the code enforcement officer. So that would occur after the town planner reviews the project. And then alternatively, if your project is a tier 2 or tier 3 application, you would be notified of that and you would mail notice of a public hearing on the project to abutting property owners. And then the town would post notice of public hearing at the town office and on the town's website. Then within 45 days of receipt of an application, so typically within the next meeting of the review board would review your application and make a decision to approve with conditions, or deny the application in accordance with the relevant review standards of Article 2. And then running concurrently with that, you can also apply for any additional permitting required under the core zoning code. That might be things like a small project plan, which is reviewed by the code officer, or a large project plan, which is typically reviewed by the town's planning board. And then that would be reviewed after determination from the review board. So it's sort of a concurrent process if you're at a tier 2 or tier 3 project. The draft ordinance that was posted on the town's website also outlines a process for expanding or adding historic districts. That would be a zoning amendment to your official zoning maps that I showed earlier. So according to state statute, that would need to go through a recommendation with the planning board, a public hearing with the select board, and then ultimately be voted on by the entire town. And then we added an additional requirement that the historic special district review board would also weigh in on that, since they would be the ones ultimately tasked with reviewing applications there. It also outlines a voluntary process for establishing local landmarks. These are one-off buildings that might be outside of historic districts, but still add to the overall architectural, cultural, or historic character of Newcastle. Because that's a change to the zoning or the ordinance itself, it also needs to be reviewed as a zoning amendment under state statute. So again, same process as before, with a recommendation from the planning board to the select board, and then ultimately town meeting vote. I just want to note for the planning board's benefit, since the workshop that you had on this, we have made some administrative changes. We received legal review of the ordinance back by the town's attorney, and then I worked with the town planner to address his outstanding comments and strengthen and clarify the existing standards. These were intended to really be administrative changes and not policy changes. And then I also made some edits as suggested by you all at the workshop, focused on providing flexibility around where members of the review board would hail from, and on providing, in terms of the historic districts, they would still need to be residents of Newcastle, and on providing flexibility in the qualifications of members. So we had talked about, rather than expressly requiring a degree or direct work experience in historic preservation, they could have a demonstrated interest in historic preservation. For the benefit of the public, in terms of next steps, the planning board's role this evening is to provide an overall recommendation on the draft ordinance. And then that would need to go, well, depending on the comments we receive from you all, the ad hoc historic preservation committee will meet again to address any outstanding comments. Then we would schedule a public hearing with the select board on that amended ordinance based on your comments. That needs to be scheduled within 45 days, according to your core zoning code. Then the select board will need to hold its own public hearing, and it will be added to a special town meeting warrant for vote ultimately by the town. Thank you for your time. I think that's all I have. Just wanted to sort of set the stage in case you haven't come to any of our meetings before. And I will be available to answer any questions as we hear from the public.
Great. Thank you very much, Isabel. All right. At this time, we're going to open the public hearing portion of the meeting. Thank you all for coming and showing interest in this. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I not speaking loud enough? Oh, you have a mic. Great. Okay. I was just going to say, so because seating room is tight, unfortunately, we couldn't get a room at Lincoln tonight. It was very busy. We're going to pass the mic around. So please wait once I recognize you to make your comments, and please speak into the microphone for the benefit of the folks who are viewing this on TV. You may tune in later. So I would like to also request that since we do have a good crowd here tonight and we have additional business after the public hearing, if everyone could limit their comments to 5 minutes or so, and that would give us all time to say everything that we want to say. The last thing I just want to remind everyone about the nature of a public hearing. It's not a debate, and we have the benefit of having our consulting planner here with us, and she said she's willing to help answer questions, but we really are interested in just collecting the comments and hearing what your thoughts are, and then that'll roll in, like Isabel was saying, to further work on the ordinance that the ad hoc committee will be doing. So if you are interested in having a more in-depth conversation about the ordinance or anything, in-depth specifics, I would encourage you to seek out any of the members of the ad hoc committee through email or phone, or run them down on the street, or whatever the case may be, and they can help have a more in-depth conversation with you. So at this time, we'll open the public hearing. Do we have anyone that would like to make a comment?
Can I also just point out that to reiterate, speaking into the microphone is important, not just for the people that are watching at home, but also to get your thoughts on record. Otherwise, when I go back to do the minutes, it's just going to be, mouth moving, and I won't remember. So for your own benefit.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Katharina Kewen, and I live in on 5 Cross Street in the historical area. I found out at the last meeting that I am not actually included in this
In the special district.
in the special district. And this is actually something that a neighbor emailed to me and asked me to deliver because they are out of town. I'm here to say that I am very pleased that I am not in the historical district. I don't want to be in the historical district with these type of regulations. So I'm very pleased that I'm not. I'm surprised that more of my neighbors have not come out. Because based on the last public meeting that I went to and the talk from all the neighbors, and it's a very nice, close-knit neighborhood, everyone seemed to be very against this type of regulation, overstepping. So I'm just passing that along. I don't really want, I don't like reading in public.
It'll be included in the minutes of the record. We have a copy of it.
Gotta be part of the record, Steve. Thank you.
Okay, I'm all set. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. So
Can
this
someone
is,
read it so we can hear on the phone, so we can hear it?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Can someone read it so that we all hear it?
Yes, I'm going to read it now.
Thanks.
Okay. Good evening. We are traveling in Iceland, but want to share comments in absentia. The Historic Preservation Ordinance as proposed poses material risk to the built history of Newcastle and the economic well-being of the private property owners within the designated historic districts. Many examples abound of the failure of historic preservation ordinances throughout the United States of America. Relevant scale examples include Stevens Point, Wisconsin, and Somerset, Maryland. Many larger cities, including Los Angeles, New York, and Washington, D.C., offer their own examples of historic preservation ordinance failure. A recurring risk posed by historic preservation ordinances is the economic burden in both time and resources placed upon the private property owners of historic district properties. Newcastle imposes rules on a select few and offers no compensation in return. A targeted tax and taking of private property, how un-American. The added burden posed by historic preservation ordinances regularly result in deferred maintenance, reduced property value, and constrained property resale. Deferred maintenance in particular poses material risk to the long-term viability of the historic structures the community thought to preserve. There is no need for this ordinance. It is un-American in the challenge it poses to the quiet enjoyment of private property. It is a waste of municipal resource and will attract persistent and expensive legal challenges from current and future owners. No similar ordinance was required to build the designated properties and attract the current private owners. Captain Glidden built quality homes for his purposes, and subsequent owners have maintained and improved them to the present. Newcastle is important to us all. Leave well enough alone. Do not adopt this ordinance. Thank you. Kind regards, the Copes, 71 Glidden Street. All right. Do we have anyone else that would like to? David, go ahead right there at the.
Excuse me real quick. Is that Rick Fly? Or was that profession? No.
I don't know. I'm sorry. It is just signed the Copes.
David Levesque, 30 Glidden Street, in the smack in the middle of the special district. I think as you've heard by the written comments in the first comment, then you're probably going to hear it often. And I'm going to express my feeling and what I believe is the feeling of many of the people in my neighborhood, is that this ordinance is not needed, nor is it wanted. We trust our neighbors to do what is right in the neighborhood. We've all spent a lot of money to buy into the neighborhood without these restrictions in place, and we will not devalue it, and we do not need such an ordinance to keep us to what we believe are the best standards for the neighborhood. I am concerned that this restriction only applies to approximately 76 properties. Newcastle is much bigger than that, and this ordinance is designed to hit specific people. And if such regulations need to be applied, they should be applied across the board. There's historic properties outside of these districts, and they escape the onerous restrictions that are in this ordinance. And if you're going to apply something, it should be applied to all who are concerned. Now, I looked at the comprehensive plan, and it makes some big ideas, and many of those big ideas need to be worked on. And one of them is safety and improving sidewalks and walkability and the intersection of Newcastle Square. I would submit to you that that's much more important than inflicting these restrictions on 76 properties. Also, it is inconsistent with the code. The code talks about historic easements and incentive for homeowners to maintain historic properties. It does not talk about inflicting these restrictions on them. So and I think it was mentioned in the written statement that Chair Ben Fry read to you, is that I believe the ordinance as written is creates a chilling effect on renovations. But also I think it is a chilling effect on renewable energy systems as well. It's of note that our neighbor, Damascotta, their historic preservation ordinance actually exempts renewable systems. Newcastle has chose to inflict a process that would prevent people from actually pursuing those projects. The code also talked about the simplicity of zoning rules and regulations, and this certainly deviates from that. This is not simplifying. I would encourage the board tonight in its determining its recommendation to the select board to listen to the public tonight over the planner, not the planner, sorry, but the over the consultant, obviously, who has a vested interest in getting this passed. But she mentioned that there was a general consensus that they wanted to put the historic preservation ordinance off to the side during the code creation and passing that, but there's no evidence to back that up. It might have been the old Historic Preservation Review Board that was interested, but the general public, there's no evidence that shows that the general public wanted this to go forward. I just wanted to mention that since she said that there was a general consensus. In her written memo to the board, she mentions that by granting this ordinance, it would allow for certain historic preservation funding that could come to the town. But in an earlier meeting of the committee forming this, it was really said that that's not really a big thing or would result in a lot of funding, and certainly it would go to the town, not to the homeowners that had to incur the cost of the ordinance. I would say that we already have standards for demolition, so we do not need to apply to the whole town, the way I understand it. So we don't need to separate the districts for more intense regulation. And again, I just have to impress upon you that the code says that we wanted to simplify regulations, and this seems not a lot of simplification. So I ask you to consider everybody's comments tonight and then ultimately recommend to the select board that not to go through with this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. I'm sorry, I can't quite see. Yeah, come on up.
Hi.
Hello.
My name is Erin Miller. I live on Woodland Street as well. I'm here to say I was really, really excited when I read the comprehensive plan, especially when it talked about the lifelong living community section, where it went into talking about walkability, aging in place, zoning flexibility to allow for middle housing to meet the needs of single people, empty nesters, retirees, and young families. My husband and I, we have 4 sets of parents between us. They're all closing in on 80 years old. We own 1.75 acres. We have a big field. We were really excited about the idea of building a cottage at some point for one of our family if they ever needed to live and be taken care of. Was even more excited when I read the zoning code because it was absolutely clear. I could build a single story unit. It could be up to 1,200 square feet. It could be 30 by 40 on either side. It told me what roofs were allowed. Like, it was a path to exactly what we were looking for to potentially need for our family as we move forward. That this new ordinance takes absolutely all of that away. Our house was built in 1969. Why are we in the historic district? First of all, our neighbors' houses were built in the 1800s. It would be actually literally impossible for us to come up with a design that is visually compatible with the immediately adjacent structures. Like, how do you mix 1969 and like 1850? So to move forward with this plan means we'd have to invest time and money and put a plan together with zero idea whether it would be successful, which to me is like gambling. The potential requirement to escrow money to fund possible consultants actually just sort of adds insult to injury. Building the cottage would already be expensive. This increases the cost. And it's just something we wouldn't be able to take. I could not risk spending all that money to then be told no. Like, that would just be not enough for us. Like, despite my gray hair, I'm actually one of the youngest people probably who owns a house on Glidden Street. There's maybe like 3 or 4 people who are younger than me. The whole neighborhood is big, beautiful homes, owned by people in their 70s and 80s. No one my age or younger is going to be able to afford these houses and maintain them at the current rates. At this rate we bought 8 years ago, I would be cost out if we tried to buy now. We would not be able to afford to live in this neighborhood. What this district does is it discourages any alternative uses or all these big, beautiful barns that are just sitting empty that could become units or houses or apartments, or the big giant homes that no one can actually really afford to maintain could become apartments. There's got to be, to move forward in the neighborhood, you have to consider these alternate uses. And this ordinance shuts all of that down. It makes it completely financially undoable. I love the idea of preserving these beautiful homes, but we need to make it so that the neighborhood can actually survive going into the future. If we let this go through, these houses are going to start being bought up by people as second homes that aren't going to be heated in the winter. They're going to be sitting empty, and the entire walkability in the beautiful neighborhood we have is just going to be desolated. Like, I think this is a horrible idea, and it goes against all the ideas in the comprehensive plan to make walkability and aging in place and supporting locals so that we can all stay here and live here. It just doesn't add up. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else? Any more comments? No? You don't want to make comments? Come on up.
Also here, if that's okay. My name is Jada Kavanaugh. I live at 185 Glidden Street. Thank you for the opportunity to come here and talk to you about something that's a little bit painful for me and some of my friends over here. I've called Newcastle my home for the last 5 years. And in my prior life, I lived in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I worked for, I was the manager of a residential association of 200 homes. And I worked, it's making me nervous with that camera. I'm so sorry. And I worked on a stack of documents, yay high, and I had to make sure everyone was in compliance of that. And that job sucked. And to be honest, it was really hard. And so I get having an external consultant to make it a lot easier for you. No matter how hard you try to make this document clear, and it is not, despite the wonderful efforts that have been put forth, it's still not clear. You're going to have people interpreting the rules and regulations, and then a board is going to change over, and then that person is going to interpret it, and then amendments are going to come on, and then those will be interpreted again and over in this changing document. And you might think, oh, well, maybe it's just going to be between the board and a resident who wants to and should be able to build for their extending family, should be able to do that. Sorry to point you out, but really, I felt what you were saying. And excuse me, it's not going to be just between the board and her duking it out, because everyone's going to have an interpretation and an opinion of what is happening here. And opinions, when they're not happy, are sometimes really loud. And those are the ones that you hear about a lot. I wasn't at this particular meeting where it was discussed, but some of the board members were talking about asking neighbors to police on one another. That's not going to build any sort of community, which speaks to what the whole code was actually really trying to do. After this experience, I vowed to myself I would absolutely never want to live under housing restrictions like that again. And yet here I find myself, I'm going to have to go to a board and ask them, hey, can I put up this light fixture that maybe you guys think is a good idea? I've been to several meetings before, and I'm going to say it again. I think this document's pretty dangerous as it is right now. When I first heard about the committee and all the impending rules, I asked myself, why? Why after, thanks, why after 300 years of being able to live and support our homes and be good stewards of our homes, we've bought them, we pay taxes on them. Why are we no longer trusted to maintain our own homes? Because that's exactly what this says. This says we don't trust you now to do what you've always been doing. I'm not here because of demolition or new construction. I understand those are a little bit different, but the imposition of the tiered system of homeownership repair that adds to the timeline and definitely the expense may even cause delayed maintenance, which is an unintended effect. And it's certainly going to price people out of our neighborhoods. I grow more and more concerned every iteration that I see. I could go line by line. David, I appreciate that you did that, but I'd be here all night and I don't have that much time. But I do think that the code is pretty arbitrary and certainly is full of overreach. In the pursuit of why, which I spoke of before, I asked a couple of times, like, why is this happening? And the first answer I got was, well, do you want a glass house on Glidden Street? Second answer was, well, it's a density issue and we don't want too many houses. You can pack a lot of houses on a lot. And then finally, I think the settled on answer was, well, this was always the plan. Right? Regarding the review board, I'm going to, just fire off some rhetorical things if you are looking at, firming up some ambiguous language. What prevents the select board from appointing the same people over and over again, even if there's someone new willing to serve? How will you choose if more than one person is interested? How will you call for volunteers? Additionally, if you're going to increase the district, are those people going to be able to have a representative? Or if someone has landmark status that they've put themselves in, how are they going to have representation on this, on the board? And qualifications, I know were softened a little bit, but it still wants people to have historical knowledge and archaeology knowledge, architecture and engineering. And if we have a board that is that capable, I don't know why we need an architecture review. And that's probably my biggest problem with this whole system. The historical consultant. And I don't know how many people have read it in depth, but in a historical consultant, you're not allowed to choose your own. They're going, you have to just put up money, which is an arbitrary figure. They're not telling you how that money is going to be determined. You're going to put up some money and then they're going to spend it, I'm assuming appropriately. I don't know. And then if it's not enough, they'll say, oh, you got to give me some more. And again, you may not even get approved after all of that happens. I have to quote something here because I literally, it drops my jaw. The quote is, results shall be deemed to have been made solely for the benefit of the town and shall remain its property. Such fees shall be assessed for the privilege of review. And I don't think having to go through this is a privilege. I don't know, anybody else? I don't think that's much of a privilege. You can go back and read that for yourself if you want to, but that language is, it makes me question. And I've got a little, maybe some trust issues with the whole thing.
Do you know where that quote came from?
I can find it for you by the end. Yeah, for sure.
I just wanted.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of this is in pursuit of, the golden ticket of a certificate of appropriateness and sounding lovely. That's great. But also, and I do know where this part is. You can go back and read this if you haven't. Article 3, Section 2, KC talks about you can have your project started and you have to finish it in a year. Well, there are some people probably that I know that are in the middle of a project and their builder ditched on them and they have to find a new builder. And then I also know other people who are doing construction right now and they can't get the supplies that they need. Or you're trying to mill the work to make it look appropriate to your house and you can't get that done in time. So that's great. It says, well, we may be able to give you an extension for another year unless we've made amendments to the ordinance. And so, yeah, then we won't do that. So you could end up with a hole in your house and your project not finished. And you might think like, shocking, really? It actually says that. That was Article 3, Section 2, KC. And it makes me go, amendments? What do you mean amendments? There's nothing in here other than it says we can make amendments that talks about how to make amendments. What can be amended? Any leeway we have with the committee. We've been given little, yes, we've had meetings and a little few things here or there have been taken out for me. I was really upset that we weren't allowed to have security cameras at our house and that was taken out. But if they can write an amendment, they could just take it right back out again. They can, right now it says you can choose your own color of your home, but with an amendment, they can change that. And that's a slippery slope. I've talked about a slippery slope with opinions and clarity of standards, and I'm not going to go through them all, but in case you weren't at the meeting at Lincoln Academy, this story is a great case study of maybe what's going on here. And a woman was asking about having her light fixture replaced. And the reply from the board is, well, I know you and you have great taste. So of course yours is going to be approved. And it makes me think, is that what this was always the plan means? That as long as we like it, as long as it suits our taste, then it's okay? Because really, how can you have standards for a home from 1700 when they didn't have electricity then about what their light fixture looks like? Is it that you want to appease to visitors that come and Ken and Karen from Kentucky come up and they go, oh, no, about your home? The public realm is just entirely too big. You've got homes that you can see the front, the sides, and if they live on the river, you can see the back too, and they won't have any opportunity to make any changes on their own to their home. It's unfair. It's unjust. And I think someone said un-American, and I'm going there too. In closing, I want to say that I really like the town's general code. I think you said that as well. It's clear, it's concise, it's not intrusive. There's not too much red tape. I mean, we went through the process before of like, well, if this happens, then this, and then this tier, and then you go here. It's too much red tape. And then it brings me to, well, this was always the plan restrictions. I know my property, who is not currently in a district, will be placed in a district, much to my disappointment. And I'm asking you, I guess, with all of this information, to press pause. Yes, we've had meetings where we have been spoken to about what's happening. We've been allowed to give our opinions like we're doing right now, but not a lot has changed. I'm listening to people say the same thing over and over again. It's too intrusive. It's too much. A historical consultant is too much. It's too much money. We're pricing people out. And really, when you can make any amendment, it doesn't matter what you're going to, the little, bone that's been thrown at us about a change here and there. Perhaps what we need to do is, you've got a lot of people who are interested, and I think there's more people that couldn't come tonight that maybe this has been a very top-down process. And maybe we need to go from the bottom up. Maybe we need to have not really, we're going to just listen to what you say as lip service, and then we're going to continue to plow forward with this, which is what it feels like, at least to me. But maybe actually sit down and have some real discussion about really what is, like, how can we change this? How can we find consensus? Because so far, there's been consensus on this meeting, on this board. There's a whole bunch of consensus on the street, but the two aren't meeting in the middle to actually come to terms with what can we do to continue to allow you to live, prosper, be good stewards of your home, but also carry on with the look of what has been so wonderful. The reason why I think this exists is because, yeah, these historic areas, they're great and everyone wants to keep them great, but there's got to be some trust that we know what we're doing. And so how can we balance all of that? If you've ever walked Cornell University's campus, you see that they've got their old buildings and they've got some really just not pretty buildings from the 70s. And then, I'm sorry if anyone went there, they're just not pretty. And then they've got their newer buildings and some glass buildings, or they're moving forward. And they talk about it. And they say some campuses, they take down their 70s, they're ugly, but they don't. They allow it to be a moving history of where their campus was, how it moved through history, and how it's going forward. Article 2, Section 1C3 of the ordinance acknowledges that changes have taken place in our historic districts and over time, and that those changes that have taken place have woven into the fabric of what we have right now. So it's unclear to me, why are we saying, but enough is enough? We're going to pause on that history and we're not going to let you continue to move it forward. Maybe we need to consider that there are homes that are existing now and we allow them to evolve and be true historic representatives of Newcastle, its past, its present, and its future. In a time when we should be encouraging people to move to Newcastle and for it not to be a financial burden and to keep it somewhat affordable so that a family can come and they can buy a house they can afford, and they can add on a nursery when they need to, and then they can add on a family room when they've got a gaggle of kids in there watching, TV on a Saturday night. They should be able to do that. Maybe that right now, this isn't the time we want to say to people, nah, you got to do it our way or just stay home. I suggest that anyone who is able to vote, even if you like the ordinance, and I'm sure there are people who do, with the committee's ability to amend, this ordinance that we vote for may not be the ordinance that we live with. And the committee has told us before this was always the plan. And we have no idea what the other side of the plans are. We don't know what other plans are in store for us. And so I appeal a no vote from my friends, and I ask the committee to really press the pause button because it's not ready to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have anyone else? Yes.
Good to see you all again. My name is Steve Pop. I live on Sheepscott Road with my two sons. My wife purchased that house. Loved the house. Spent one evening in it, took ill, and shortly after passed away from ovarian cancer. The house is paid out for outright for my boys. They will live there forever. They'll hold that house forever, and for my grandchildren and their children beyond. You know, we're sitting here and none of us know why. We know that we're being misled. You know that we're being misled. So let's all be adults and carry on from this point. You know, there's no clear notification on this between the Lincoln meeting and this. There was nothing, no cute little card came in the mail, no nothing. Okay. Underhanded. We know that. Okay. You know, but the process, tier 1, tier 2, article A5, 3, okay, dizzying for somebody to understand. And the application, you have to fill out, beg this, beg that. Why are we here? What is the behind the scene Machiavellian inappropriate reason for this? You know. We don't yet. Okay. No notice, unacceptable. Okay. Where we're at is unacceptable. The process is unacceptable. It's been reviewed by attorneys from our side. It's unacceptable. Okay. Besides being borderline unconstitutional. Okay. And several of you know, and we've told quietly, that you don't believe in it. And it's not actually something that you stand with publicly, but privately you stand against it. So no truer words were spoken than at the Lincoln County, at the Lincoln school at the meeting. And that was Mr. Fry said regarding, well, we don't want to do it would be an undue burden. That is correct. Quote, undue burden. Okay. And you're aware it's undue burden, which opens you to civil litigation in the future personally, and it penetrates any protection you have from elected or municipal role. However, it is an undue burden, and you know it, and that's why you said it. And like this woman so eloquently said about neighbor didn't like a light. She said, but you're okay. So would it be okay with you putting in that light? Because I like your taste. You've got great taste. This woman so eloquently said, I'm not in the district now, blah, blah, blah. You will be in the future. It will creep. This is designed specifically to do something that we don't want. You do not have to put up with it. You do not have to ask for permission. Do not stand for this. Permission is given by that flag in the corner that we didn't even pledge of allegiance to tonight. Thank you, gentlemen. Permission by the people that fought for that flag and fought for this country and fought for our Constitution. Okay. You know, you say, well, this can't be done. It can't be done. You know, why can't it be voluntary? That's been said to you over and over and over. Okay. A program that you can get in or get out of, not shackled. Slavery has long ended. Okay. If you look at properties like one of my favorite in the world, and I've been blessed. I went all over the world with my wife before she passed. The Isabel Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston. When Mrs. Gardner lost her child and put up that property, it was a beautiful Italian palazzo. It was just gorgeous. All of Back Bay, all of the neighborhoods went crazy and said they didn't want it. Now it is one of the most celebrated properties in the world. And when they recently put a massive glass contemporary addition to it, everybody went crazy. Now you go and the concerts are full. People love it because, like you said so eloquently, man, last person that was up, and I'm not eloquent. I'm just very blunt. It's beautiful. It's the growth. It's the development, like a child growing. And we watch them grow and when we watch them go. And that's what our neighborhoods are. That's why I love this neighborhood. I will stay here. I will fight this to the absolute bitter end. Okay. And I will fight your opinion on this, Mr. Fry. Okay. and your personal interest that you have in this. And you know, and I know privately what we're talking about. So
Just to make
It is
clear,
not-
I don't.
you do. That's okay.
No, thank you.
So when some lips are moving, we know they're lying. Permission is given by that flag. It is not given by these people. And do not fall for it. And vote against it no matter what. You're supposedly here to listen to what we have to say. You know, in so many languages, no means no. It's very simple, all similar. It's a shaking of head, no. And we are saying no, we do not want it. We will not accept it, and it will not happen. But thank you so much. Have a good night. Appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else who wants to speak? Yep.
I just have a brief comment. I live with my husband at 76 Glidden Street. And we also are
Sorry, can I just get your name quickly, please?
Becky Mortar and David Curry. We also are very much opposed to this ordinance and have tried to participate in at least a couple of the meetings that you've been holding in discussion of it. We totally, completely agree with Jacqueline Kavanaugh. Thought her comments were very capable and very useful to you, especially the comments about getting bottom up instead of top down involvement from the community, which has been mentioned a couple of times in the meetings I participated in and has not at all happened. The very makeup of the ad hoc review, preservation review thing was basically copying a lot of what your previous design review committee did, and it also involved many of the same people. So you weren't really getting new opinions or useful opinions from the public until you'd already held about half of your meetings and gotten far down the way. David Levesque mentioned that he had estimated about 76 properties in the town of Newcastle will be affected by this by being in the historic district. That's a very tiny proportion of the houses and the numbers of people who live and pay taxes in this district, in this town. All of us are, as much as I can tell, pretty much all of us who will be affected by this ordinance are not in favor of it, have voiced concerns both in small amounts and in overall large amounts about how this will affect not just us as homeowners, but the district itself and the people who live in it, how we buy, how we sell, how we live, how we go forward, as the gentleman who preceded me was expressing himself. My concern is that I believe I understand that the vote eventually, if it gets to a vote, will be by the whole township. And the majority of people who are going to vote on this, if it's the whole township, are not directly involved with this. They like walking the streets, walking their dogs, seeing how pretty it is. They don't have any real information or any concern or care for how that came to be, how it's maintained, how we who live there work together and care together and have created our own neighborhood of people who love these places, who are there by choice and who have continued. We bought our house, which was a semi-wreck because it had been owned for 30 years by one person. It had been messed up internally by the predecessors from that owner. We bought it in 2013, and we have spent 10 years and lots of money in restoring and renovating, two different things, that property to make it live up to all of its neighbors. But some of what we've done wouldn't have passed your ordinance as it stands now, which is just to me astonishing if you look at the house and its surrounding. So if this gets before the town of Newcastle for a vote, it is highly likely, because that's how people vote. If it's something that they are concerned with, they're going to say, yes or no. If they're not really concerned, they're just going to say, it's the board. Sure, they know what they're doing, and check it off. And it could pass, even though you have a very concerned neighborhood that is opposed to it and has been requesting throughout these meetings that you change your approach and speak with the owners and the neighborhood and see how you should approach what you're trying to do and if it's really viable for a long-term future. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else? Yes, in the back. Sorry. Okay. You're next. That's okay.
My name's Keith O'Leary. I live at 24 Glidden Street. This is the first town meeting of any kind I've been to in Newcastle since we've lived here, which has been since 2002. We love the town and we intend to stay here for as long as we can. I'm not well versed in all of the finer points in this ordinance, but one thing occurred to me tonight, and there may be an answer for this, I don't know, is a lot of the people in this room, whether they know it or not, for some reason, are going to have to sell their house. My question is, what does this ordinance do? I mean, it either does, it limits a buyer who goes into a historical protected area. They may know that up front, but that limits the buyer. The other half of the argument here is if you have a buyer who wants to make changes, you are interjecting approvals and board meetings on top of what is a very stressful process of buying a house that sometimes people need to close in a very short or finite period of time. And I can see an ordinance like this just being so difficult for that process that it's going to make people's lives pretty miserable if they ever get to that point. All I have to say. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. The gentleman in the back.
Hello, Jonathan McCoy. I live at 74 Glidden with my wife, Britt Halverson, who can't be here. I'd like to lodge a philosophical objection, which is a little different perhaps than what we've heard so far. I want to thank the board for what it has done here. I understand that there are reasons for being interested in historical preservation. And I would suggest that I think a lot of the people present here are not totally unsympathetic. I think there's an issue of process. We all chose, those of us who find ourselves in the proposed area, all chose to live there and are proud of it. It's one of the greatest communities I've ever lived in. And one of its strengths is the people. And I think there's something about focusing on the houses and on particular sort of arbitrarily defined architectural features that perhaps is a little bit besides the point. For example, there are trees on the street that are older than the houses, and they are part of the look as well. There are other things in the neighborhood that make the neighborhood what it is than just the things that would be regulated by the ordinance. And part of what makes it the community is, again, the people gathered here. And there is a lot of goodwill on the street towards one another. It's a wonderful community. I think this board would be wise to harness that energy rather than push something from the top down in a way that doesn't respect the goodwill and the sort of pre-existing love of the town that we all bring.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Okay, hello, I'm Joshua Jacobs. I live with my wife and children at 10 Glidden Street. Okay, so first of all, just thanks for the neighborhood showing up. It's kind of awesome to gather even under these circumstances. And also, I appreciate the efforts that have gone into a very difficult problem. And I think I just want to touch on a couple things. The idea of the burden on the homeowner for people who haven't, I've read through briefly the document, highlighted some things. And we just point out what feels like would be a very practical burden among many. And it's this idea of the historical consultant. I just want to kind of, for people who aren't maybe as familiar, and maybe I'm misspeaking, so feel free to clarify this, but my understanding is there will be situations when the homeowner is not granted their own judgment on what to do. In these situations, it's required that a historical consultant be brought in. I think it was said that the homeowner doesn't choose who that historical consultant is, which is unusual in a building project, to not pick your team to execute your vision. And another concerning part is that the price of that is the homeowner's burden, with a wide range of possibilities which are not present in this ordinance. So just to be clear, like, I would have to hire a consultant I don't choose with a bill I have no control over. One might assume there's rational limits to that, but this is a document that's a form of like a set of rules, and that those limits don't exist. In addition, I have to put the money in escrow up front. Again, there's no range of how much that is. So, for people who maybe aren't affected by this, it's a reasonable thing to think that our elected officials are doing their job to protect our communities. We all want that in whatever form it makes sense. And you're the authorities, presumably with the education and the wherewithal and the insight and the wisdom to make the best decisions. So I just add this as like someone who will be affected by it. It's one among many like real burdens that are not theoretical or hypothetical. They'll come up like almost right away. Just this idea of hiring a consultant, not of your choosing, putting the money up front into escrow, and the burden of that is substantial. So I couldn't vote for this, even if everything else was perfect, just because of that. But it's a difficult document. It's not. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. Thank you all very much. We're going to close the public hearing portion of this part of the business tonight. We're going to move on to talking about new business on our agenda, which are various other things. We have a submittal meeting, so you're welcome to stay. You don't have to, but thank you very much, everyone, for coming out and giving us your comments. They will be recorded. Yes.
When are you going to deliberate and make a decision for the rest of the deal?
We do not have to do that, nor are we going to do that. Our responsibility extends as far as holding a public hearing. So the next step in the process, yeah, I understand that. The next step in the process is that it'll be reviewed by the select board. They will have to hold a public hearing and they will make the determination about whether it goes to vote or not. That's not up to us. Yep. Thank you very much for coming. Good to see you.
I've been here in the field board, the planning board, the company. Now,
I won't ask then. It's good to see you though. Always. Always. Yeah. Always. Have a good night. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so I'm gonna, if it's all right with you, I'm just gonna switch us around a little bit.
I was
since-
just gonna ask if.
Yeah, we have a pre-submittal meeting here with a potential applicant. So we're gonna switch 4A and 4B around. So we have a item 4B under new business, pre-submittal meeting for 10 Mills Road, map 013 lot 017-001, which is Rob Nelson. You want to come on up? Do you want to, Jeff, is it good where it is? Great. Okay, good. Thanks.
I printed one out for me, but thank you.
Yeah,
I got your
yeah.
email earlier.
Thank you very much.
There are two sides to this, two potential scenarios.
Oh, and maybe I just say, maybe you're all familiar with this, but this is a pre-submittal meeting required because the what's being proposed will probably or almost definitely need subdivision review. And so part of the ordinance defines that there should be a pre-submittal meeting with the planning board before a formal application is accepted and kind of reviewed by the board. So that's what this is. And I think you've probably seen them before. So.
Yeah, we've done several pre-submittals. It's so wonderful. It's great. No, it's wonderful. Thank you for explaining it for everyone else. That's good. So go ahead, give us an overview of what you're thinking about.
So I'm in response to an RFP from Maine Housing. I'm exploring a project on a property on Mills Road, just a couple of doors up from the intersection with Academy Hill. That would be multi-unit housing. The program is provides housing for occupants who are 80% or below of median income. But we're looking at building some, using modular construction to build some housing that can meet those cost targets. Cost targets, very challenging to make it work. I'm looking at what I presented to you is a couple of possibilities. One is two larger buildings of 6 to 10 units. Another scenario is looking at one larger building and a couple of duplexes. And some of the key elements of figuring out how to work the site are to use virtual lot lines that the core zoning code provides for to meet the frontage requirements and the side setbacks. It's been very educational to actually try to apply the code rules to a project of this scale and figure out how to fit the pieces together. But I think one of the things that's going to drive a lot of this and which direction I go are going to be the cost, getting some cost numbers to figure out what can meet the targets necessary in the program.
So can you just tell us a little bit about that process? Because I mean, we can talk about the specifics of the site and everything like that, but as I understand it, the application that you are intending to bring forward would be contingent upon receiving funding from this program.
That's correct. So I know one of the requirements is it in an application is demonstrating financial ability. I would be asking for a conditional approval pending award of the Maine Housing funding. The Maine Housing provides all the funding basically for the project. So I would be, basically picking one of these scenarios or a tweaked version that I'll be turning into an application. And then, then I would be asking for approval, pending that financial award.
So which way are you leaning?
I don't know. There are things I like about either scenario. I think frankly, the larger buildings cost out easier. The more efficient use of space to get more units per cost. I kind of like the layout of the one with the couple of duplexes. It's just all challenging of fitting into the site. So the one of the challenges, frankly, are things like the maximum side yard setback. In D5, there's a maximum side yard setback of 25 feet. So the building can't be more than that distance from the property line, which means it's challenging to figure out how to get vehicular access for parking. In the two building scenario, I'm putting a road right of way, which on the current standards in the roads and entrances ordinances are that all roads, whether public or private, have to be a 50-foot right of way. So under that, and I understand that's something that's being looked at, but right now that's what the code says. So in that scenario, if I put a right of way through that left side, that gives me room to put parking in that, have access and the parking in that most of it in that right of way. And then the remaining frontage works because the other tricky thing here is that there's a maximum of 100-foot frontage for a lot in D5. The frontage of this whole parcel is about 188 feet. So you can't just split it into two. Because of also the 35-foot maximum setback or 25 maximum side yard setback. So it's, as I said, it's been very educational applying the code to real buildings.
Yeah. But you've done it.
I think I've got a couple things that could work. Yeah, it's I don't think, you tell me if I missed something.
I mean, without obviously,
I know, yeah,
without
I
a
know,
full
I
review
know,
or
yeah,
whatever,
of
but back
course.
of the napkin talk.
Of course,
I
yeah.
mean, the dimensional standards, I think in both of these scenarios are probably good.
My only thought is you've got, if I'm understanding this right, on the two building,
Right.
the 50-foot right of way, you got parking that kind of splits it.
Right.
So I would think that wouldn't be, I don't think that would be allowed. I would think that the intention of the virtual lot lines is that it basically would function kind of as its own lot. Not that you couldn't have parking for this on the other lot, but
Right. So saying that there's parking can't
kind of straddle the line. I
Oh,
think
okay,
That's
okay.
not that I think you could probably get the parking to work in
Right.
in that area. I don't think that's the issue.
so that it should stay either within the right of way or out of the right of way,
Yeah.
but not straddled.
Right.
Okay.
That's I don't know.
I mean, tell me again the thinking behind, so the darker gray area to the left of the actual property line, that's a 50-foot wide
Right of way.
right away. And
Correct.
so what's the thinking there?
That is a designated road right of way.
And that falls under the driveways, entrances and roads ordinance
Correct.
for a private or a public road.
Right. In a private road in this case.
And so you're thinking that has to be a private road.
Correct. That's one method that I see of making all these dimensions work. Because I can't, if I don't do that, then that building on the left has to be within 25 feet of the left property line, which leaves very little room to get parking anywhere.
Around that side.
That's the tricky piece.
So, I mean, the problem with the virtual lot line that I think you've drawn there for that right away is that you can't create a lot, either of record or virtual. I'm sorry, you can create a lot, But you can't put anything on it without a primary building.
You can't put parking on it without a primary building, but is the road a lot?
Yeah, the way you've drawn it, it is, right? Because it would have X number of footage of frontage on Mills Road. Essentially, you're dividing the 180, what?
88.
88
188, right.
into 4 virtual lots.
Well, I guess that's the question is a road in a subdivision. I'm just doing subdivision. Is
Yeah,
a road
yeah.
a lot or is it its own thing?
Yeah, I would think that you could put parking on a road, private road.
You can, yeah, yes.
Because I guess I'm thinking that that wouldn't be a lot. The same as, because I don't think we would, I don't think, not that it matters what we want, but I don't think the ordinance is going to require a primary building on a road.
No. No.
So you'd be able to put parking, I would think you'd be able to put parking on it without a primary building. Like, I don't think it's a lot. It would have to be, really would be an easement that I don't know.
Easement on what, right?
On a lot, yeah, that's what I'm just
right.
thinking, would that be a separate lot? I don't think it
Yeah.
would. I'll have to look
Yeah,
at
that's
the road ordinance,
I
because
gotta look at the language.
Yeah.
even if it was public, like the town, besides ignoring the fact that the process you have to go through to get the
Yeah.
town to accept it.
Right.
You know, you could have a 50-foot right of way, but it's not going to be a independent lot, right? I mean, there's
Right.
No, it would not be.
so without having that ordinance memorized, my assumption is that basically you could put, this would just be a road there, private, but that doesn't make any difference, that you can put parking on. But would that still be part of the other lot?
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to double check. My memory is not perfect, but I want to say that it requires a 50-foot right of way, and a right of way itself does not contain like, hard setback lines. It is a thing that is a right of way over something else and abuts lines itself. Does that make sense? So it actually doesn't, the right of way doesn't actually create anything.
Because you can
It
have,
doesn't create a condition where like on the other side of the left-hand side of the right of way follows the property line, but the right-hand side of the right of way itself is nothing. It doesn't create a line that you then have a setback off of.
So what is
Well,
the
but-
setback then?
25.
From
From
25 max from what? From the line that
From the
is
lot.
on the one side of the road?
No,
So
that's what I'm saying.
What does putting a road there do then? To where the
but
house
roads give
can't-
you frontage. So it becomes a frontage.
that's, I think, because you can have a right of way that is like can straddle property lines, where you could take a piece of property, cut it in half, and then put an easement that's 25 feet on one
One
side.
side and on the other side.
Right, but that doesn't, that property still stays as part of those two lots.
Correct, it does.
But I would also think that there should be, if there's not, we should address this. There should be some mechanism where you would take that same piece of property, and instead of creating 2 lots, you create 2 lots and then a third. It wouldn't be a lot, it would be it would be like a public right of way.
Like a traditional,
Does function like,
right, like a traditional
Town owns it.
subdivision, there are the roads and then there are the lots.
yeah.
Yes,
And the roads aren't part of the lots.
it
They're the-
depends.
Well, yeah, I guess it does depend. They might be right of ways,
Yeah,
but they might also be just part of the subdivision.
yeah. No, I think you're right.
Yeah, and
It-
just
it-
like if you, the road is 50 feet and it's 25 feet, they're either side of the property line. You got a maximum 25-foot setback. Of house
Can't
must
build
be
on the road.
on the road,
Right.
like
Yeah, no,
pavement siding.
Yeah.
No, that doesn't.
you're right.
Well,
can't
there's
do that.
there's
So
a minimum of 0 feet, so you could do that.
you
but
could do, but
you don't-
Yeah, yeah.
but you must do that. Actually,
Right.
Right, no.
Yeah.
you have no choice.
So what you're saying, that virtual lot, okay,
So
that virtual lot basically is just the whole
Is-
right of way.
Right. That's, or,
Weird.
no, that's a question, obviously. Um,
I think it could stay private, but it would,
Yeah.
you would treat it as though the property line, cuts in there. So if you were looking at like the shape of the road,
Mhm.
it would extend all the way, both Mills Avenue goes either direction. But there would be a little jut out base, like any other road,
Right.
form a corner there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't have to be, like, there's no frontage requirement for
For a,
like a right of way, whether it's public or private.
no,
There shouldn't be any.
no, there's no frontage required.
Right.
well,
it
you
is
need
in
an
terms of it
entrance.
being an entrance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to
need
follow
that
the
en-
entrance standards,
Yeah.
whatever that is, and I don't know it off the top of my head.
That's the
That's the.
that's the
frontage.
analogy
Yeah,
to
that's-
a frontage is you'd have to have an entrance.
Yeah. But this is a pre-existing entrance.
This is yes here.
No,
Yeah, I can't get around the.
but that also could, that lot would be conforming, right? I mean, it has enough. What's the minimum here for the minimum
The minimum
lot frontage? What
is 20.
Yeah, so even if you just.
Oh,
cut
even
that off,
right. Yes,
it would still be a lot.
right.
You'd be creating a virtual lot. Exactly the width of the required right of way. And the only use on it would be parking, but that's the only use on that lot.
Well, it's a road. It's not, I mean.
But it's
I-
so what's the difference between, I'm not trying to put you through the ringer.
No,
I'm trying to understand this.
I agree. I agree. No,
What's the difference between a road and a parking lot?
road,
I think it would be multiple owners, multiple rights to access.
Multiple rights to access.
well, but in this case, though, their ownership isn't changing. So, I mean, I guess the people on the other side, maybe it's a private road.
I think, yeah, I think the difference between a driveway and a private road,
Yeah.
ignoring the physical differences, would be who has a right to
Yeah,
travel.
a driveway is defined as limited to
Yeah.
two units.
Right. No, what I'm talking about is what's the difference between a parking lot,
Right.
Well, a parking lot.
a
would be-
parking lot and a private road in this case.
Right, yeah.
Right.
Well, were we discussing a driveway being just part of the parking lot?
Yeah. As
Well-
far as I remember, there's no dimensional standards on driveways.
Correct.
It just is part of a parking.
It's just a driveway is a driveway.
Right, right.
We kind of just only define it by the number of uses it serves.
Right.
Right.
Has a maximum.
Right. But
So the idea is that once you go beyond those uses, you have to do a road, which
you
there
gotta
are
go
standards.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But what,
Good question.
it's such a good question. I mean, it's a really good question because I mean, I would say that I think the ordinance is pretty clear that you cannot have a lot without a primary building, the use of which is only a parking lot, unless it's a commercial paid parking lot.
I think there's a little bit more to it than that. I mean, there's more
Essentially, but I
restriction.
mean, like,
Yeah,
there's more to it, but essentially
Right.
you can't just have can't carve out a lot and just say that's
And
gonna
just
be
say-
parking
right, correct.
all by itself.
You can't do off-site parking in the ordinance.
Excuse me, what?
Can't do off-site parking?
Effectively, no, because you can't, a lot can't have parking on it unless it has a primary building.
Right.
With a couple of exceptions, but
Right.
none of which would apply here.
Right, so.
And the only reason that we're going on about the right of way and the virtual lot line is because you need that virtual lot line that's hitting the back left corner of the 6-unit building,
Right.
closer to the building to meet the maximum side setback dimensional standard.
Correct.
Love it. So the duplexes look great.
How wide are the buildings, those two?
The large ones are 32 feet wide.
I'm just trying
Yeah,
to figure
yeah.
out what the math, which I imagine you've already spent.
Yeah, yeah.
time doing, so.
32 plus 50, is 82. So if you had two of them, that's 164, which is less than 188. So, you need to do something else, and you can't just create another virtual lot and put the parking there, because virtual lot, a lot needs to have primary building on it to allow parking.
I think that's correct. I mean, you technically, there's no limit to the number of virtual lots you can create, other than the fact that they have to conform to the base dimensional standards
Right.
of the district that they're in.
Which in this district is only a 20, there's a 20 foot
20 foot
minimum. Right.
Right?
20 to 80.
Yeah.
20 to 100.
20 to 100. Right.
Is there a reason you don't expand this kind of flag lot kind of that you're creating on the
Right
right side of the map here?
Yeah.
Just make that wider, move the buildings over, and
Parking.
leave a separate leave that lot, undeveloped part.
Right.
Bigger.
Well, one of the, mostly it's just to not have everything bunched up, so it fits the neighborhood better. I don't want to stuff everything together too much. I want to kind of, we're looking at the neighborhood and sort of get the right spacing and scale and mass, and not have it look weird, basically. So that's why I didn't want to go over. I want to move things more to the left in either scenario, just because it feels like it will bunch things. It just feels like a little bit of space. Obviously there's a big open space there now, but if you can look at the tax mapping, sort of get the outline of the buildings and sort of how far things are apart.
Mhm.
It felt like it was a reasonable distance.
Okay.
So I'm asking myself a couple of questions here, like, if maybe what's just throwing me is that you've got the parking right there on the side of the building. So for example, if that right of way just contained a private road, because it'd be a subdivision because of the number of uses, right? Units that
Correct.
it's serving.
Correct.
It'd have to be a private road. If it was just a road, paved or unpaved,
Mhm.
accessing a parking lot behind the buildings, would we be having the same conversation or not? I don't think we would.
If there was
a
nothing
private
on the road right
If
away.
there was no parking on the road,
Right,
and if like the roadway just went
Yeah, yeah.
back
right.
and accessed a parking lot that
That
was
was on
fully
one of-
behind,
One of the
building.
other virtual lots.
would we be having the same conversation or not? I don't think
because
we
some
would.
of it, I think.
You think so?
Because roads regularly have parking within the right of way.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Right.
kind
Yeah.
of getting at, is that, of course.
But I think one of the things we have to clarify is, how do you treat roads? Are they lots that are not allowed to have other uses on them without a primary building? Which I think logically would say, yeah, you're allowed to put parking on a road. But we should check the ordinance on that.
Or fix it.
Well, depending on what it says, fix it or not, yeah.
Maybe some clarification will be good.
Yeah.
One way or the other, but
Yeah.
on the other hand,
Yeah, right now.
Yeah, right, that's.
I mean, you can't have a road that you can't park on. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. but I also do get your question of what's
Not
the
allowed
difference
to park
between
on
this
Route
and
1, but. Right?
Yeah, I mean, that would be.
I mean, you're not allowed to park on I-95,
That's true.
but that's fair. I mean, you don't have that kind of road here, but.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, actually, there's roads that you can't park on.
Let's just limit it to municipality level, because state and federal, we don't have
Right.
any.
No, but I mean,
say over, but like-
you can put no parking signs on. You go to
well, we've
cul-de-sac.
got to draft the parking
developments all the
ordinance, right?
time.
Yeah, parking
Yeah.
ordinance, yeah.
Like there's local roads that just say like no parking. You go to like heavy like HOA area.
But that implies you could park there legally.
Sure, but with an ordinance, you could say no parking.
Yeah.
Somebody could do that. I wouldn't recommend it, but I think that it would be within the right of an ordinance, municipality to design an ordinance that says not allowed to park on new roads.
Yep.
And the other thing, of course, is given the current standards of a 50-foot right of way
Mhm.
for a private road,
Mhm.
if you can't put parking on it on a lot like this,
Mhm.
you're eating up so much of the lot.
Oh,
that
it's crazy.
You just can't
Yeah.
make it work.
Right.
So it's, yeah,
It wouldn't be,
the constraints make it weird to,
Yeah.
I mean, if you couldn't put parking on that right of way, yeah, you're eating up, what is that, like at least a quarter of the lot.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
And the other constraint here is on the back of the lot, I've got a couple dashed lines of approximate tree line that we want to keep as many trees as possible. One of the, maybe backing up on the front lot of the lot, if people aren't familiar with the Mills Road frontage, these big, beautiful trees that we're really trying to make sure we don't get too close to. And the part of the reason for trying to keep the existing entrance is to not, I investigated scenarios where I put an entrance on the right side of the lot. And I like using the existing entrance because I know I'm not going to mess with any of those trees. So we want to preserve as many trees as possible, both in the front and in the back. So part of the thinking is to not have to put all of the parking behind the buildings, which would mean taking down that little grove of trees. So another constraint, not a code constraint.
Yeah. Can I ask, like, if the 50-foot right of way requirement on private roads was not an issue, would that significantly change your thinking in the design of the parking area? Probably not. Based on what you just said.
In this scenario, probably not. Yeah, I guess I mean, again, trying to not have to go too far back with parking. The fact that the parking is all set back, the frontage zone setback.
Mhm.
It's, yeah, I probably not at this point at least in this scenario, that might open up other opportunities or other ways of thinking if it were smaller.
Yeah.
And I think it does make sense. Doesn't make sense that a private road and the public road have the same standards. But that's what we're working with right now.
Right. No, I'm not suggesting that obviously we need to dial in the roads ordinance a little bit better, because this is bringing up for more than the first time an unintended consequence of this 50-foot right of way requirement. So I think what we're saying is that it doesn't really matter if this is your preferred scenario with the parking where it is and the two larger buildings, which would otherwise meet all the dimensional requirements. The question is just whether or not essentially the road creates, and it absolutely would creates the setback requirement for the 6-unit building and the parking on a lot. You wouldn't, I guess what's throwing me is the virtual lot line you put in, because you don't need it.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Because, yeah, right.
It's
right,
unnecessary, right?
Right.
So if you just like remove the idea that
Yeah. Okay.
the lot that the 6-unit building is on,
It's just got frontage it's got frontage. It's a corner lot.
it's a corner lot. Now
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah. Yes.
does that make sense?
Yes.
So
Yes, of course.
well, would that be more than 100 feet wide, that lot? Would that be part of the issue?
Oh, if the lot included the road, yes, it would be way over. 100.
It would be,
But what we're saying is if the road, I didn't have to put the dash line along the side of the road because it's not a virtual lot line, it's a lot line because it's a road. And so that virtual lot has frontage on Mills Road and on the new road. So it's a corner. Yeah.
it's a corner lot.
Oh, okay.
And that's what I'm saying is that you're creating a road, and roads are exempt from the frontage calculation.
Right.
You just subtract it.
They don't
you don't. Yeah.
Their roads don't need front. That's what
Roads don't eat frontage.
But
Okay.
so I threw you by putting that line in.
That's okay.
Sorry.
I think I got there. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
So does that, okay, so 0 foot, so the secondary front setback is what the setback on that road would be.
Right.
but it's 0 to 15.
Then you've got it because the back corner hits.
Yeah, it's pretty much. Yeah.
Okay, then the parking would need to be configured because it's,
Oh, right now I've got another frontage. So what does that, yeah, I'll also think about what that does to the parking. Okay.
also, you're gonna have to be set back.
Oh.
Oh, no, you got 0 setbacks, front and back, on the front. So
What's it? Well, no, what did you say the secondary setback is?
Secondary front setback is 0 to 15. 0 min, 15 max.
So then you've got it.
But yeah, my only thing is you're not gonna be able to have parking that spans the.
Right, okay,
But
yes,
that's,
yeah.
but that I think you can just move. that.
Yeah, or I can angle it, do an angle or you
Yeah.
know, something, yeah, different way to configure it.
We have thoughts on the other.
Yeah,
This one looks like it's more straightforward. But again, you just have to like kind of shift the parking so that it's not on doesn't straddle the lot lines, but
well, I guess just so there's parking spaces on one or the other, but not straddle.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's, there is something about buildings are allowed to like encroach on the side setbacks with virtual lot lines and connect across them, but I don't think. parking
Okay,
is gonna-
okay, so just make sure the spaces,
I mean, I think if you put a parking space, especially since it's 0 side yard setback, I think if the parking spot was.
right, yeah,
on-
okay, right, between
fine.
two spaces,
Yeah.
but not, yeah, not, I
Not
get it, yeah,
straddling.
not
Yeah.
straddling,
That's what
sure.
you're getting at.
Yep.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm also thinking about the parking on, we have no parking requirement. So.
Correct.
If you're gonna have parking, it can be on an adjacent lot. Because we don't have any requirement, you could over park one. And then have no parking on this one, and then those people could just park next door and we don't regulate it. Do we? I don't think.
No,
Yeah, but that's a non-commercial parking lot. On a non-road,
Well,
on
it's
a
a,
separate
No,
lot.
but both
So,
would
but
have
both-
houses. I'm saying you'd have,
but this
two
parking lot spans,
One,
the
two,
parking lot
yes,
spans virtual lots.
yes.
Is that a problem?
Is it a problem that there's no parking on the lot
Right.
with the 10 unit?
there could be I think my understanding is there could be no parking anywhere on here. It'd be. okay.
Yeah, except for the neighborhood.
Except that there'd be
Well,
no
I mean,
parking.
it'd be.
Oh, there'd be no problem, but
The people who live there may object, but
yeah,
it could be built.
But are you saying, or are you concerned about parking on a lot without a primary building? Is that what you were?
I just want to double check that language. I guess that's what I'm saying. Like, I just want to make sure that
well, each of these lots have a primary building, but it's the question is, who is that parking serving?
correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I'm saying. Like, I think you could over park one of the, well, any parking is over parking, but you could put more parking than units on one lot, have none on the other.
Right.
And it would,
Because there's no limit to the number
gotta
of
double
parking
check,
spaces you
but-
can have.
yeah, I don't
There are
think
no
there's a-
standards for how many parking spaces, right? I don't think there are any. limits.
Well, when you go over a certain number, there become more standards.
Well, right, but I'm there.
But you're
Right,
there,
Well, I'm
yeah.
there in aggregate.
In aggregate. Yes.
And that,
Well,
And my access depends on it being a parking lot.
yeah, and this is
So-
where, exactly, this is where the lot of record versus virtual lot
Mhm.
just has to be sort of hashed out. Right?
Yeah.
Because the number one rule about virtual lots is that you have to be able to, if you had to, you would need each virtual lot to be able to be made into a lot of record.
Right.
That's like the number one rule of virtual lots, right? You can't create a virtual lot,
You can't create a
a
non-conforming lot.
non-conforming
Right.
virtual lot or lot of record.
Right.
It has to be conform.
I think the one exception that I know of is with setbacks with buildings that connect. There's something in there about,
I'm sorry,
Yeah,
you're
but-
right,
yeah,
yes,
yeah.
but in
Otherwise-
general, yeah, right, thank you, yeah.
assuming you're not finding one of those
Right.
exceptions. But can,
But can parking span virtual lots? I mean, this is one of those things where honestly, if it's not addressed in the code specifically, then yeah, sure, go for it.
Yeah. Well, off-street parking must be accessed from an alley or secondary road.
It's being pretty much undefined.
Yeah, right. So I mean, I guess we could
Yeah, go back to calling.
put
it
an alley there, and then it would be. It does say parking lot should connect with existing abutting parking lots.
Oh.
Yep.
Doing that.
So I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it does say when there's no abutting alley or secondary road, parking may be accessed from the primary. So I think.
Yeah.
So the question of parking lot, private road, those are really the only issues that play here, right?
I think so. I mean,
The buildings themselves meet the, you are going to be subject to the design standards.
Right.
Of the district.
Yep.
And based on its location, you're obviously putting in the number of units or whatever. You're not talking about private well and septic. It's all
right. Town water and sewers.
Yeah. So I think the only other things, like when you do the application, is going to be because it's a subdivision, there's those, what is it, A through U or something ridiculous, right?
Oh, yeah.
Make sure you address each one of those. For subdivision.
Right.
And then beyond subdivisions, you just have to do the
Still small project plan, right? It's less than 10,000. So that total.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that, yeah, Tori, you got something? Yeah.
Is the intent to go for application before you understand what main housing is going to provide? Yeah. You'd be asking conditionally, but
Yeah, I'd be asking for conditional approval.
Yeah.
Yeah.
correct.
Well, I think it's a bit of a, because you're looking at doing that funding program, it's a chicken or the egg, right? Because you have to be able to prove to the program that you can do it and have the approvals necessary to get the approval for the funding.
Correct. Yeah. No, I mean, there are a lot of points for being ready to move forward. So having town approval in place is pretty much critical to have any chance of getting an award.
I guess the logic would be that we would assume that if you get the award, then that would count as the financial ability to do the project.
Correct.
So then I think that the conditional approval seems pretty simple.
Well, turn it on its head. If you don't get the funding, are you going to do the project?
No.
There you go. So,
No, no.
If the condition of the approval that we,
It's
possibly
totally
grant to
appropriate.
you, right, would be dependent on the funding.
Yeah.
Therefore, you wouldn't have the approval if you don't get the funding.
Right. I don't have the ability, I would not have the ability to make the project work without the fund.
Right. So, yeah. I don't see an issue
The
with
project
that.
does not work economically without. the
Correct.
funding.
Right. Yeah.
But assuming you get the funding, you could do the project.
Correct.
Finances wouldn't be an issue.
Correct.
Is there a timeline you expect here? 6 months?
I don't know what their what the award time is. That's a really good question. I'll ask that. I don't know what their time is. It probably is somewhat dependent on how many proposals they get, and how long their review process takes.
There's a closing date on the applications though.
Correct. That's December 3rd.
December 3rd.
7th, 3rd? Early December.
The early December, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And what, again, a lot of their criteria are readiness. So I think their intent is to move forward quickly.
Mhm.
They want to see things happen. So projects that are ready to go are going to score better than projects that aren't. So I assume on their end, they've got incentive to move quickly, but I
Yeah.
don't know the exact time.
Well, they probably didn't put a limit on themselves to say like,
No,
we
sure.
have to make
Yeah,
decisions
probably
by a
not.
certain time, because,
State agencies don't do that.
right, well, when you're making rules for yourself.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to moving forward, the only thing is the planning board would technically have to review would be the subdivision application, if I'm understanding it correctly.
Yeah, I was just noticing that this is gonna fall under, well, if it's small project plan and multi-unit residential requires CEO approval, so I'll double check, but I don't see any reason why the use and uses just needs a use permit from the CEO.
Hmm.
So we would just be reviewing the subdivision.
Just the subdivision.
That's how I understand it.
But the CEO can choose to kick it up to
Yeah.
them. So that's, I guess that would be the question is.
So eventually we may do some of this or all of it.
Right.
But your intent is next month?
Correct.
Yeah.
My intent is to get a application to the planner in time for him to review it and make sure it's complete, get it to you in plenty of time for you to review.
Yep.
And then, you know, I guess there's the public hearing and your discussion at the next idea.
Yeah, the meeting to review the subdivision application at minimum has to be done at a public hearing.
Right.
So.
Yep. Well, we'll want to nail that down soon so we can
Yes.
get notice out. But-
Correct.
All right, well, any other questions or thoughts, or does anyone else have any other concerns? You've done a lot of work,
There have been many versions of this drawing.
many versions. I love
It's
it.
like, oh, that doesn't work. Oh, that doesn't work. How about this?
Cool.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
All right, hold on, I gotta wake my computer back up. All right, so that was 4B. We'll jump back to 4A. Discussion of potential core zoning code amendment, Article 7, Section 22, demolition of, I'm sorry, did you have your hand up?
Yeah.
It's fine.
Our consultant here still. I think
Yeah.
There's some questions about procedure. So I'm not sure if this would be a time to just follow up quickly on the hearing for the historic preservation
Okay,
ordinance.
all right. What you got?
I just want to set that up for Isabel.
Oh, okay.
Isabel.
Thanks. I think that this is going to be more of an interpretation question.
Oh,
So
okay.
please forgive me.
It's all right.
So I'm looking at Article 7, Section 21 of the core zoning code, and it's D3. And it says the planning board will consider the petition for a zoning text or map amendment and will provide a written recommendation to the Board of Selectmen considering the following: the adopted comprehensive plan, the purpose of this code in general, and the purpose of the districts. Following up on your comment about not providing a recommendation, I was just curious, maybe if I'm interpreting something incorrectly.
Let me pull up the code. Give me a second. So, hold on a second. Where are you?
So I'm at the top of page 89. Yeah, 89.
And that's under zoning amendment.
Yes.
Okay, so here's the question. Is the special historic district review ordinance proposing? Hold on a minute. I gotta read it again. Is the okay, I'll say my question again.
Mhm.
Is the historic special district review ordinance proposing to amend the core zoning code, text or map?
Not necessarily. We haven't discussed that in enough detail for me to actually note, but not necessarily at this point. It would
Okay.
be attached as a module.
All right, well, I mean, then at this time, like for the purposes of like right now, if it is not proposing to amend the core zoning code, map or text, then it would just follow the historic special district review ordinance would follow the procedure for adopting any ordinance that touches land use.
Okay.
Which
state
is
statute.
So state statute,
Okay.
which is what the purpose of the public hearing was.
Okay.
So I think I'm with you, but if
Yeah.
if the ad hoc committee decides that there are recommendations to amend the core zoning code, then your interpretation, I believe, is spot on.
Okay.
Because we would be amending the map or the text of the core zoning code.
Okay. Perhaps your next item will clarify that further for me, but I think we're on the same page. I was wondering if it was interpreted broadly or specific to the core zoning code because
I
it
think it's
wasn't.
specific to the core zoning code.
Okay, perfect.
Are you looking under D procedure?
Yes.
Because all it says is amend the zoning text or map.
Yeah.
Doesn't say core zoning, right?
Yeah. That's why I wanted to pose the question if it was interpreted broadly.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Submit to, because then it says, within 14 days of receiving the petition to amend the zoning text or map, the Board of Selectmen must submit petition and the proposed changes, additions, or repeal of language to the planning board for review. Maybe in addition?
So, okay, I guess I'm hinging my interpretation on the co-joining of the words text or map to be localized to the core zoning code.
Okay.
It does not specifically say core zoning code, like, yeah, I mean, that's a great question.
Yeah.
Um,
It might end up being a legal question that I can pose, but I just wanted to.
No, it's
understand.
fine. If you would like, we could discuss it right now and we could take an action to give you a determination right now. But I don't think we need to. Unless anyone feels strongly otherwise.
Purpose is change zoning regulations.
Oh, microphone.
Microphone, sorry.
So under that zoning amendment section, the purpose is pretty broad in language.
Sure, but then the applicability says any project within the town of Newcastle. And a zoning amendment is not itself a project.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to fall back on, on the text or map amendment. Meaning that the intent was or is specific to changes to the text or the map of the core zoning code.
Okay.
I personally, I read it as that is what is implied. And the fact that it doesn't say so, well, hold on a second. the other way we could look at this is if we look, is there anything that tags onto what standard state procedure would be for the adoption of a general?
It doesn't reference state statute at all in that section.
No, I meant like in another section. That would talk about the types of things. Right, just scrolling back up. Give me a second. So, no. No. No.
So under core code administration.
That's what I was just looking at.
Yeah.
Yeah, item 3.
Yeah.
To describe procedures for seeking zoning relief, appeals, and for seeking district map or text amendments. I think that locks it to the core zoning code.
Okay.
Am I wrong? Someone tell me I'm wrong.
I'm not saying you're wrong. What I'm wondering is like, is there any reason to not make a recommendation? I don't think that it says you have to make a recommendation for, against. You can just make a recommendation and that way recommendations are made. Check that box if anybody comes and says.
Yeah.
We had public hearings.
Certainly expected this tonight.
But they went out. So, yeah. It was not my understanding that it was required that the planning board make a recommendation.
And it may not be. My thinking is like, if we don't do it, it's a problem. It's a problem. If we do it and was necessary.
That's my feeling as well. I agree with you.
That does require.
Taking a public position on a controversial issue.
Well, I mean, yes and no. I think that oftentimes when, especially in the cases where a board like the planning board is required to hold a public hearing about a specific issue relating to zoning or something like that, it's not a personal position or political position the board is being asked to take. It's simply, does this go forward? Is our recommendation that it go forward, or does it does not go forward? I don't see that there's a whole lot of angst wrapped up in that. When you consider the fact that there's been a lot of public input to the process, and we heard a lot of naysayers against it tonight, and you have to balance that with the fact that this board, asked the selectmen to create a committee to do exactly what they did. And they went through a very detailed, very open public process spanning months of time. Yeah, that's what needs to be balanced.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah.
And also to be clear, under the section that I was referencing and asking for interpretation on, it's specifically asking you to consider only the comprehensive plan, the purpose of this code generally, and the purpose of the districts.
Say that again. Are you down in?
I'm back
Zoning
down
amendment?
89 zoning amendment. Yeah. Page 89. And I think for the purposes of discussion, whichever way you decide to go on this, or if you decide to go anywhere on this, my memo outlined a number of citations of the comprehensive plan, this code, and the SD historic page. And I also think that you heard significant conversation from the public this evening about those same 3 things that you have to weigh.
I'm just gonna read it out loud because I do better sometimes. So this is 2021 zoning amendment D3. Within 30 days after receiving a petition to amend the zoning text or map, the planning board must review the petition and accompanying documentation at a regular meeting of the planning board. Planning board will consider the petition and must provide a written recommendation to the Board of Selectmen considering the following: the adopted comprehensive plan of the town of Newcastle, the purpose of this code in general, and C, the purpose of the districts that would be applied to the properties in question. Great. Yeah, I mean, err on the side. Oh shoot, closed it. I guess I'm swayed by the argument to err on the side of caution and just make a recommendation. That way, it doesn't have to come back because we are talking about timeframes here. 30 days, 45 days, so on and so forth. I lost one. Doesn't matter. Okay. So we're gonna let me get my agenda up. We're gonna postpone what we were talking about. We're gonna move right into that. Thank you very much. So I guess we'll call it item. Is it new business? I'm not sure where to put it.
What, a recommendation?
Yeah, yeah.
I guess it's maybe a return back to that. It's not really the public hearing, but old business of the historic special district review ordinance.
So 3A,
It would be like
3,
yeah, or 3B.
And
3B.
it might make sense to formally make a motion to amend your agenda to go back to that or what have you.
So moved. Any
Second.
seconded? All in favor? Okay. So we are now we'll call it 3B.
Yeah.
3B.
We closed the public
We
hearing.
close the public
I don't see any
hearing.
reason why any discussion or recommendation, deliberating by the select board has to be during the public hearing. It just says, doesn't say just within 30 days.
No, it just says shall make.
Yeah, within 30 days after receiving petition.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Okay, so we'll
So
call it
big.
3B, recommendation on proposed historic district review ordinance. Historic special district review ordinance. Good? Okay. Great. Do we have a motion? I'll move it. I move that we do recommend to pass along to the select board a recommendation for their consideration. Because that's all we have to do. Right?
Your recommendation needs to specifically include the 3 items. So
Oh, thank you.
yeah, you have to specifically consider it. So if I might make a suggestion, you could either do 3 separate motions for A, B, and C, and then a final motion on with your recommendation.
No, we'll do them together.
Or you can do it together.
Yeah. Let me get back to page 89 so that I can say it quickly.
I would think what all of this is going for is basically to say whether or not it's consistent with the comp plan, consistent with the intent and purpose of the code, and the purpose of the districts that would be applied to the properties in question. Purpose of the,
Yeah, so okay, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna back up, make my motion here. I'll move that we recommend that the historic special district review ordinance be forwarded to the select board because it has been shown by the consulting planner in her memo in our packet that the proposed ordinance is consistent with the adopted comprehensive plan of the town of Newcastle, is consistent with the purpose of the core zoning code in general, and is consistent with the purpose of the district that would be applied to the properties in question. Does that meet all the? There we go. Made the motion. Do we have a second?
Second motion.
Moved and seconded. Okay. Any discussion about the motion?
I have significant concerns about moving this forward. Speaking from me, from what I heard tonight, I think there's going to be a lot of issues, potential for lawsuits, a lot of town resources getting sucked into this. So I may be consistent with what we're talking about, but I personally think it should stop here for now. We should reset. That's just my opinion and how I'll vote. So.
What has the, I mean, I haven't been to any of the meetings. But I don't know how much of the public showed up for meetings. Or if the public felt that they weren't, I just don't know. I mean, I got the impression that everybody felt like we weren't asked. Nobody asked us. But my impression is it's all sort of people are welcome to participate.
Can you, Mike?
Yeah. So I guess I'm puzzled by the feeling in the room that nobody felt like they were consulted. I don't know. And to be perfectly honest, the impression I got is that no regulations would be acceptable. The sentiment seemed to be that we don't want any constraints of any sort, that any constraints at all are unacceptable, which seemed not in keeping with the historic district. And I don't know how you resolve that.
Public process is a difficult one, I think. You know, it's very often said, well, I wasn't asked, I wasn't consulted, I wasn't told, I wasn't informed. And it's, you know, it is unfortunate. The reality of the situation is that in the formation of all these groups and ad hoc groups and committees and whatnot, you know, before the work is actually commenced, there's a lot of requests for people to join the conversation and join the committee, and met with very little interest. And then after the work is proposed, then it's always, well, why didn't you tell me? Well, you know, I appreciate everyone who comes and talks, regardless of when they come and talk, because that shows interest in public process, but that is a reality. Yeah, sorry, Tor.
I just want to offer the board just an opinion, a perspective, to remember that this is a town, even though it's specific to 3 districts, and I think 76 probably existing parcels, properties that could be subdivided in the future. But it's a small group of people, 27 I counted tonight, that have are directly affected by that ordinance, this ordinance. It's still a town ordinance. And so I think you really ought to keep perspective that even though the people here dislike or opposed to these restrictions, we didn't hear from the other 1,750 people in town. So we got to remember that there are people, they're not going to all show up to a special town meeting, of course, but just in the broader perspective, this is a town ordinance.
Yeah, and I think, thank you for that. I think that it is, again, the thing that has to be weighed was the rules are gonna have to be voted on by the entire town. If it was just the affected properties that voted, yeah, I think I would consider it differently. Not even allowing the public conversation of further public hearings and a vote to happen based on a small minority of input that we've heard tonight does, an injustice to the rest of the voters. And I've always felt that way. And I don't think that's unreasonable to say that, hey, let's just follow the democratic process. And so my personal feelings about the ordinance aside, whether I personally go into the voting booth and choose to vote for it or against it, in my position right now where I'm sitting on the planning board, I have to consider the town perspective and what's in the best interest of the town. And it's hard for me to come to grips with the idea that it would be in the best interest of the town to deny everybody the right to weigh in. It just is. That's how I feel. Anybody else? All right. Seeing none, we do have 4 members present. So if it goes split vote, I just want to remind that does mean that the motion fails. Just so everyone's aware. So
yes, but let me just I'm just trying to think about this. That just means a recommendation still will need to be made. So if it fails, it's not like, oh, we're done.
Correct.
So
yes,
yeah.
The recommendation has been to pass it to the select board.
Right.
If that motion fails, a motion will need to be made because the ordinance tells us that it has to be made. So another motion will have to be made.
Yeah, we can't leave tonight until
someone makes a motion.
A motion passes, not this one necessarily. Just a motion.
A motion has to pass. All right. So all in favor of the motion. I'm not going to repeat it because it was crazy long. All in favor of the motion. Okay. 2-2. The motion fails. So now do we have another motion about a recommendation?
I guess we go about this kind of mechanically. There's the 3 items that are considered that needed to be considered: consistency with the comp plan, consistency with the purpose of the code, and consistency with the purpose of the districts. So
you want to take them one at a time?
No, I'm just going to say, I mean, I guess we could also just discuss, is there one that, or 2 or 3, it doesn't matter. I'm going off of the assumption that one of those is not consistent in the view of the board. So I would think the simplest way is to figure out which one of them, or which 2 or 3 of them are not, make that motion, vote on.
All right, well, then let's start with, let's just have a discussion until somebody feels the need to make a motion. The question of whether the proposed ordinance is what was the word you used? Consistent with the comprehensive plan of the town of Newcastle. Does anyone have any comments or thoughts about whether it does or doesn't? I will start us off, and I'll refer us to our packet, which I got to get to now. Way too many. There it is. Okay. So, oh. Okay, there it is. All right, so at the beginning of the PDF in our packet entitled 2023-09-21 HSDR Ordinance Public Hearing Packet.pdf. The planning consultant Isabel provided us with several pages of background information and chronology, overview of the changes, what our role is, and then on page, is that 2 or 3? It's 3, comprehensive plan consistency, where she points out the various places within the comprehensive plan and makes an argument that the historic special district review ordinance is consistent with those areas of the comprehensive plan, or that those areas of the comprehensive plan specifically point to or reflect on how it is consistent. Do we have general agreement, or do we have disagreement, or do we take issue with that interpretation?
May I suggest maybe going backwards? That consistency with the special district, historic district, that's a small part.
Okay.
And then you can go
We'll
back
skip
to,
it.
and then you can kind of zoom out to like consistency with the core zoning code. And then,
Yeah. I mean, this is all public documents, and I really don't want to read all this because she's written an awful lot. So consistency with the SD historic district. I think the nuts and bolts here are I guess the kind of starts in the center, the middle paragraph, right? The stated purpose of the historic special district, is as follows. 1, to preserve areas that are identified as historically distinct. 2, to allow new development to proceed in an historically appropriate manner. 3, to provide the community with a predictable outcome from development and redevelopment. 4, to enable residential companion uses. And then goes on to say that the historic special district review ordinance would preserve the existing historic properties within the historic special district by regulating alterations and additions to them. In addition, the ordinance has new construction standards which would allow infill development to proceed in a way that maintains the overall character of the district by regulating scale, form, composition, and the relationship of the new construction to the street and to the abutting properties. Finally, the historic special district review ordinance is silent on uses, except for that uses cannot alter the residential character of buildings. Otherwise, the permitting authority would refer to the core zoning code for allowed uses. And for me, the crux of the issue is it says right in the district to preserve areas that are identified as historically distinct, to allow new development to proceed in an historically appropriate manner. I think that seems pretty clear, given that that is the stated goal of the proposed ordinance.
Yeah, I'm just reading those four. Preserve the areas identified as historically distinct. To allow new development to proceed in historically appropriate manner. To provide the community with predictable outcome from development and redevelopment, and to enable residential companion uses. I don't think the last one is, I mean, that's pretty straightforward. To enable companion, I don't think it does anything to add or detract. I do think an argument can be made, the predictable outcome, based on what we heard tonight. Some people feel that it was not, that the standards are not clear and predictable. Not, that if that's the only thing that in there that I see as that you could get a toehold on. The other three seem pretty straightforward. And I don't know if you want to discuss that, or we can go to the general standards or you know, of the whole code, the purpose there. There's 14 of them. So I don't know if you want to discuss.
No, let's stick with this one. I mean, I think we need to make a decision.
I guess I would just say again, the issue that I have is not that I feel like it's not consistent with the code, or I feel like it's not written correctly, or I think it's written very well. A lot of time went into it. I think if we forward it to the select board, we need to have an addendum that lets them know every single person here who spoke is opposed to this. The people in these neighborhoods are opposed to this. I don't believe for a second the majority of people out there are going to come and support this. This is going to make the rounds on Facebook. It's going to be in the newspaper. People are going to be opposed. So if they want to make the ultimate call because we're volunteers and they're elected, that is fantastic. I think we know where this is headed. So the idea that there's 1,700 people out there, great. Most of them are going to be opposed based on what I saw tonight. I could be wrong. I'm not a pollster, but I think if we forward this, we need to have the addendum. I counted, there were 9 people who spoke. They were all opposed. 0 people spoke in favor. I didn't hear anyone from this committee speak in favor. So if all these people are out there who love this work, why didn't they speak tonight? That speaks volumes to me as a resident. Some of the people who spoke tonight are people who volunteered for the town, have offered to volunteer for the town. This was not an organized group. This was not a mob. It was people who were opposed to this. These are educated people. There are people out there who are not educated on this who are going to be opposed. So again, I'm fine to pass it on, but I just think the Board of Selectmen needs to know there's going to be a larger group that goes to the next meeting, and this is going to be voted down by the town. That is a given. I'm just speaking for myself. As a planning board member, however, if we need to advance it to end the meeting, I'm fine with that. But I think there's 2 issues. There's the issue of how people feel about it, and there's the consistency piece. Now, you were right, Ben. We're planning board members. We're not voting today. But if we're passing it forward, they just need to know that it's going to be a controversial issue.
Well, there's nothing wrong with the recommendation having, you know, addendum, like you say, attached to it. And obviously this is all public record.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I do think Michael is absolutely correct that the process that the planning board right now is engaged in is literally just, does the proposal meet those 3 criteria? And if we feel that it strongly doesn't meet any one of those criteria, then that's grounds for not. But if it does meet those three criteria, which are the only criteria we're allowed to consider, then I think it's beholden on us to actually follow the process. So
well, and I think pretty much no matter what, this goes to the select board. It's not as though the planning board is like, no, it doesn't, not going there. It's simply making a recommendation. So it's entirely, I mean, you can say it is not consistent with any of them. It's not consistent with one of them. It's consistent with all of them. And then you can put whatever caveats on there you want. Those are, which from what you said, it sounds like you're saying it is consistent on all 3 of those, but you have concerns about public.
Isabel, go ahead.
Thanks. Just for the purposes of maybe assisting with crafting a motion.
Mm.
It is fully within the board's purview and right to add an addendum as you're suggesting, and maybe it's just referencing the minutes
Mhm.
of this meeting and saying, you know, here's our recommendation. We would like to have the minutes attached to our report to
Right.
indicate the conversation that occurred, something along those lines.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and again, there's a difference between, like you said, personally endorsing something versus following the review criteria that we have to follow. So I think keeping the conversation in the bounds of, is it consistent with the historic district? Is it consistent with the code? Is it consistent with the comp plan? That's a question we have to answer. That's how we should phrase the motion with addendum. That's appropriate. Either of you feel in a particular way about?
Sounds good to me.
So let's just dive back into the historic district consistency with the SD historic district. Do we want to vote on these separately, or we just want to have general consensus? I think it'd be easier just to do one motion if we have general consensus on an item. If we hit a roadblock, then we'll vote. Do we have general consensus that it is consistent with the SD historic district as stated? Or not? I'm seeing head nod. Does that mean yes? I would agree. I think generally it does is consistent with the definition and the description of the SD historic district within the core zoning code. Let's pop up to consistency with the core zoning code's purpose. Maybe we'll just read the bulleted ones, or I'm sorry, the bold. There are 14 items of purpose at the beginning of the core zoning code, and Isabel has highlighted several of them, and I'll just read them out loud. Number one, to implement the comprehensive plan of the town of Newcastle. 3, to equitably balance the regulation of real property with the interests of the community as a whole. 4, to preserve and enhance the existing character of Newcastle's traditional walkable villages, to continue to promote neighborly activity, to respect the existing built form, and to honor the historic development pattern inherent in the villages. Item 8 is to promote the adaptive reuse and preservation of existing buildings. Number 9 is to permit redevelopment and infill construction that contributes to and preserves the character of Newcastle. I think those are the most relevant ones in regards to considering whether it's consistent, whether the proposed ordinance is consistent with the purposes outlined in the core zoning code. So do we have general consensus that the proposed ordinance does those things?
I have no objection.
I think it's clear that they do. It's stated in both documents that those are the intents. And I don't think I can nitpick any one of those items and say that it is not consistent. Unless I'm missing something. All right, so not hearing anything, we'll just pop right up to the next one, which is the comprehensive plan consistency that we've already started talking about. And it's a little bit bigger because there are some things, you know, sort of throughout the comprehensive plan. And I want to be clear, there is literally nowhere in the comprehensive plan that it says, thou shalt go forth and create a historic preservation ordinance. But it does say some interesting things, I think. Under celebrate local heritage, this is on page 3 of Isabel's memo. From the comprehensive plan on page 9, Newcastle is a living museum of cultural history, a history which should be preserved and celebrated for residents and for future generations. Newcastle's landscape still tells the story of its past, with several intact villages which are unaltered in their character and cohesiveness, containing buildings from the 18th and early 19th century, long before colonial villages took shape on the land or timber was first cut and sent to England. Native Americans migrated, blah, 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 blah. Then it says there was specific thought given to the preservation of Sheepscot Village. While Sheepscot Village is on the National Register of Historic Places, this does not provide protection against demolitions or new construction that would be out of character within this historic neighborhood. The comprehensive plan specifically noted historic structures located in Sheepscot Village range in condition. And most recently, the village lost the iconic Twin River House at side atop Dyer Neck overlooking Sheepscot Village. When asked to what extent should Sheepscot Village be a place that is protected in time, survey respondents cited desire for almost 100% preservation. It also expressed an openness to small amounts of change so long as it is sensitive to the village's historic character. Preservation of open fields and scenic views across landscapes should be considered as important as the protection of historic structures here. In addition, there was further thought specifically given to the preservation of Damariscotta Mills. Residents also expressed a desire to link the historic, architectural, and cultural contribution of Damariscotta Mills to the identity of Newcastle through formal establishment of an historic district. Residents feel that the Mills is deserving of a similar protections to ensure that renovations and changes maintain the historic character of the neighborhood. I mean, that what I just read came out of the comprehensive plan. It didn't come out of the proposed ordinance. And I don't think that could be more clear. And I know that some of the feedback that we heard tonight was that the residents said no one feels that they want this type of protection. But in the adopted comprehensive plan of the town of Newcastle, which the whole town voted on and passed by a 2-to-1 margin, it says exactly that. I'm not adding words, deleting words, changing words, or twisting words. So in my opinion, for the purposes of whether we're trying to determine if the proposed ordinance is consistent with the comprehensive plan, I can't say no. Yeah. We have general consensus on that.
Agree.
All right. So in light of that, I think we have two options. One, someone can make a motion, a different motion, or we can revisit the initial motion and recall it and run through that again. Is there anyone who would like to make a motion?
I mean,
none of us want to make a motion, but
right.
We have to make a motion. Let me put it that way.
All the comments during the meeting are part of the public record.
Absolutely.
So, we could point out to the select board that they need to consider those, but they're there. So.
Yeah, no, and there's nothing wrong with reinforcing that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Want to recall the initial motion, vote again, and just add the addendum. We encourage the board of selectmen to review the comments and note that they were 100% opposed.
Yeah, I think that that's
important to know.
Yeah. Would you like to make that motion?
Sure. And move that we pass this forward. Because it's consistent with the code, but we note that 100% of the public comments were opposed, and that's going to be going to the next level. So.
Okay. So we have a motion. Do we have a second? Great. All right. Motion and a second. Any further discussion about the motion? I think we've already covered it all. All in favor of the motion? Motion passes 4-0. Thank you. That was a bit of administrative work.
Thank you very much for your very thoughtful consideration and for your significant amount of time. Thank you.
Thank you for pointing that out. I'm always happy when I'm not right about something. I get to learn something. Okay. So at this point, it is going on 9:15. We have one item left on our agenda. Well, we have a couple more items on the agenda. Discussion under new business, item A, discussion of potential core zoning code amendment. Do we want to table that till our next meeting, or is that something you feel needs to be addressed this month?
No,
No?
no, I don't think anything in planning is a fire. So.
All right, then I'll, without objection, I'll move that we push 4A off to the next planning board meeting.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And that takes us to 5A, planners report.
I'll try to go quickly. There's, in addition, 10 Mills Road, there's a second new potential housing development between 12 to 18 units. This one is in the fabrication district between the railroad tracks and Route 1 underpass, just single building. So that's by Zanderley, it would be on his property. You know where that is. The pre-submittal meeting for that will probably be next meeting with it also would go through subdivision, which we need to talk about because state subdivision law does not require, actually kind of precludes multifamily housing from going through subdivision. But again, we'll talk about it at another time. Main Street US Route 1B redesign, that project, which I may have mentioned before, was it was approved for, or the grant was approved by DOT, I think last month, and we just submitted our scope of work and draft request for proposals. So as soon as we get the DOT's final sign off, we'll be going out for RFP to hire a consultant to kind of lead us through the design studies and redesign of Route 1 and the intersection in front of Public House and where the on-off ramp is from Route 1. Shoreland zoning, the main DEP sent, but we have to send our code for them to review. They reviewed it. They noted that there were significant things missing and a couple corrections. I updated that. It's just pending legal review, and then that'll come before the board for, well, the same process that any ordinance needs to be adopted on. So I'm expecting we'll have that to the select board. Whether it's here by the next meeting, I don't know, but it'll be to the select board hopefully within the next month.
So wait, I just clarify on that one. That has to go to the select board and then come to the planning board for a public hearing?
No, I think when I talked to Kevin, the interim town manager, the process is technically, I think any ordinance changes should go to they kind of get filtered by the select board. And then they say, okay, here, go to the planning board for, if it's a land use thing,
public hearing.
For review, for public hearing, all. So they just, at their next meeting, they just say, yeah, here, go. It's actually the same thing with that draft amendment to the core zoning code that was on the agenda tonight. I think that already went to the select board and they sent it here. So, but I'll confirm that.
But just to be clear, a public hearing of the planning board is required
for any
ordinance change. Like
of the public hearing for any land use change.
For any land use change, that's what I should have said.
Yeah,
yeah. Okay.
That's as far as I know. I don't think there's any exceptions.
Okay, great. Good.
So yeah, so that one will be probably coming here. It is dry, not changing the map. It really isn't changing much, except there's some standards that the state updated that we'll need to comply with. We added definitions in there, which I don't know how that was missing before. The comp plan, finally made contact with the state.
Really?
Some responses. So now we at least have open communication, and they going through a checklist for them and make sure we give them anything they want so that they can
Do we have a new contact?
finish. Kind of, I think Kevin knows somebody that works in that department and got a response.
Okay. Okay. That's going on 9 months?
But yeah,
That is 9 months.
Yeah, well, it was last submitted in January.
Yeah, okay, so that's 9 months.
Hadn't heard back from them, but now we've heard back from them.
Great.
So that is everything that I have got.
Good.
So
Thank you.
Yeah, that's it.
Okay, so are there any public comment at this time? We can all take off our planning board, just so you know, I don't know, we can take off our planning board hat and actually speak as the public at this time. If we want to. If we don't want to, I will make a motion that without objection, we adjourn the meeting. Any objection? Hearing none, meeting adjourned. Time is 9:16.